Hey guys, it's Thomas here with Technovision, and in this episode of our Fabric tutorial series, we're going to show you how to create a custom block like this Ruby block that you can see on screen. Alright, so to get started, you're going to come over to your Package Explorer here, and just like in the last few episodes, we made this ModItems class here to register our items. We're going to create another class now to register our blocks. So we're going to go to Registry here and right click, create a new Java class, and we're going to name this ModBlocks. Because like you would expect, this is going to store our custom modded blocks. So inside of this class, we can do exactly the same thing that we did in ModItems, which is make a block object here and then register it. So let's first make a block object here with public static final block, and you want to import this from net.minecraft.block. And we're going to call this, in my case, I'm making a Ruby block for our Ruby item. So I'm going to call this Ruby_block. And this is going to be equal to a new block object. Now you're going to pass into this a fabric block settings object. So fabric block settings, but not an object rather. Sorry, I misspoke. You're actually going to use a static method called .of. So instead of doing new, you're just going to do fabric block settings.of. And let me bring this down here. And you can see in the of method, it's asking for a material type or a material and a map color or a dye color. So first thing you want to pass in is a material with material dots. And this is going to allow you to select a material for your block. Sounds self-explanatory, but I'll explain in more detail in a second. So I'm going to select metal for mine because this is a crafted ore block. So I want it to be similar to like a metal block. Like an iron block, for example. But if we actually go to the material class here, you can see in more detail, and by the way, you can do that by holding your control key on your keyboard and clicking on IntelliJ to open up any of these classes here. But you can see that the material class defines a lot of interesting properties for this block. So for example, all metal blocks have similar properties when it comes to whether or not they were liquid, block movement, I don't even know what this is, but that's okay. If it's burnable, if it blocks lights, all this kind of stuff, piston behavior. So this is essentially like a group of block property settings that you can kind of put for your block. So we're saying here, use all the same properties of a metal block for our block. And then we can also pass in, if you would like, I believe it's optional here, a map color. And this is going to allow you to change the color that shows up for that block on a map. So we can do map color dots, and we can just select a color. In my case, I'm going to use red. I believe you can also use a dye color as well if you would prefer that, but essentially this just means that when you open up a map, if there's a Ruby block placed on the ground, it's going to show up as a red pixel. So yeah, now we're not done yet. Let me just pull this down here real quick so it's a little bit easier to see. We can actually chain on, just like before, lots of these methods here to add additional properties to our block. So for example, one important property we could add is the .requires tool property or method. So this is going to require the use of a tool to break this block. It's not going to specify what tool, and we're going to do that in another video called loot tables, where we'll actually talk about how you can set that. But for now, just know that this is very important if you want there to be a requirement for a tool to break your block. So we're going to do that, and then we can also do, let's do strength. So you can see strength here. You can either just pass in a strength value, which will set both of these to the same value, or you can set them individually. So strength determines the hardness and the resistance. So hardness is how difficult, meaning like how long it takes to break that block. So I'm going to pass in for mine 5.0F, which is, I would say, pretty standard hardness for a metal block. But you can mess around with that yourself and see what works for you. For me, I'm going to do also for the resistance 6.0F. And resistance is how resistant this block is to being destroyed in an explosion. So if a creeper explodes, it's asking like, how often should this block be destroyed from that explosion? And this is going to prevent it from being destroyed super often because this is a relatively high resistance value. Okay, so we can also set, this is very important, the .sounds property. Now this will allow you to determine or set a custom block sound group for your block. So of course this would change the sound that plays when you walk on the block and also when you break it and pick it up. So we can pass in a block sound group, and there's a lot here. Obviously, I am going to select metal in this case. And if we actually look at this class again by holding Control and clicking on the class, you can see that it is basically just grouping together break sound, step sound, and hit sound. All the sounds that are important for our block. It's just grouping them together. So yeah, and that's pretty much it for what I'm going to show you right now for this. But just know that there's a lot of other methods you can chain on here. Like for example, you can make it emit light. You could have it have a luminance value, so similar to like, glowstone. You could also set slipperiness if you wanted it to be kind of like an ice block. So yeah, there's lots of options here, and you can play around with that yourself. Okay, so to register our block now, we can come down here and let's create a public static void method called register blocks, just like we did in ModItems. And it's literally the exact same thing we did here. We're just going to register it with the registry method here. So registry.register. And this time, instead of registry.item, we're going to pass in registry.block. So we're specifying that we want to register it to the block registry. And then we're going to pass in a new identifier. And again, this is that identification symbol for this specific block. So it would be like your mod ID, colon, and then like the name of the block. So Ruby_block, like that. So we're going to first pass in our mod ID. We can get that again from tutorial mod, your main class. We set that .mod ID, that static string. And then we can also pass in the name. And this is the name, of course, just like with our mod items, the name of our item, or in this case, our block, that is going to be the path for it pretty much. So in my case, Ruby_block is the name. And again, using underscores there for spaces. Okay, so we can also pass in, as the third argument here, our block. So we can just copy and paste our block into there and semicolon. There we go. So we're registering the block with this path here. Great. Okay, so now that that's done, we also need to actually create an item for this block. That might sound kind of weird, but the way Minecraft works is this block is referring to the block that is going to be placed on the ground. But when you actually are holding a block in your hand in Minecraft, it's actually an item. Minecraft just tricks you into making you think that you're holding a block because it's using some different rendering. But yeah, so we need to make a block item that is attached to this block for when you're holding it in your hand. So what you want to do is go over to your ModItems class here in the registry. And we're going to come down here. We have this item section here. Let's make a new section. I'm just going to make a comment that says, let's call this block items, so that we know that this is going to be all of the block items. And then we're going to create a public static final block item. And you can import this from net.minecrafts. And I'm going to call this same thing, Ruby_block. And this is going to equal a new block item. Pretty basic stuff. And you're going to pass into this first the actual block, as you can see here, and then some settings. So very similar to an item, you're just specifying the block that it's attached to. So we can grab our block from the ModBlocks class here with ModBlocks dot, and then we can attach our Ruby block to this item, and then a comma, and we can pass in a new fabric item settings here. And I used item.settings in the last tutorial, but really you probably should just be using fabric item settings. It's just better overall. I'm just gonna switch this out here, but not super important. They both kind of do the same thing. I think fabric item settings just has a little bit more options. But yeah, so we're gonna pass in a new fabric item settings. And then again, just like before, you can chain on whatever properties you want. So in my case, I'm just gonna set it a creative tab group with item group dot, let's do building blocks. All right, cool. So let me add a semicolon there. And once this block item has been created, we can register it just like we would register an item. So let's come down here. And again, we're gonna do registry.register, pass in the item registry, and again, new identifier, just like before. Pass in our mod ID with tutorial mod.mod ID. And then the path, like usual. You want to make sure, if possible, I don't know if this will affect anything with the resource, the JSONs we're going to make in a bit, but I always just make the path the same one as the ModBlocks path. So just literally copy it from here and paste it in exactly. Where is it? Paste. There we go. And then the last thing you can pass in is obviously the block item. So let's just copy our block item here, copy, and just paste it in. All right, great. So we've registered our item and our block. But one thing that's important to note, again, remember with this ModBlocks class, we have to call this method in our OnInitialize method. So go to your main class here, go to the OnInitialize method, and just like before, we're calling modItems.registerItems, we also need to call ModBlocks.registerBlock. Or I guess I don't know why I named it register block. It should be blocks. Let me rename that real quick. There we go. So we're calling now this method when our mod is initialized. All right, so to add a texture now to our block, we actually need to use 3 different JSONs, and we need to add a few extra packages to our assets folder. So let's go over to the resources folder here and open this up and go to assets and go to your mod ID folder like last time. And then the first thing we're gonna do is create a new package in here, so new directory. And we're gonna call this Blockstates. And this is gonna hold the Blockstate JSONs for our block. And then also if we open up our models, I keep calling them packages, but I guess I should call them directories. So open up your models directory here, and we have an item directory in here, but let's also create a new directory called block as well. So we have block and item now inside of models. And then the last thing you want to do is go into textures here, and again, you want to create a blocks directory inside of here. So new directory, and we're going to call this blocks. And again, very important if you're following along with this tutorial, I have these 2 inside of models, singular, so block and then item, and then I have the 2 directories inside of textures with a plural spelling, so blocks and items. You could use a different naming schema if you wanted to, but you would have to make sure that your JSONs match up with that. So what you can do is actually go to the link in the description, and it will take you to each of the JSONs that we need to sort of paste in here, just so that it's easy for you to sort of follow along and not have to type this out yourself, but I will explain it in detail. So let's first make our model. So go to models block and right click, new, file, and we're gonna name this, again, exactly what you put for the name of the path for your block. So in my case, Ruby block. So right click, new, file, and it's gonna be ruby_block.json. And if you go to the description in this video, it will take you to this first page here, which is the models/block JSON. And you can literally just copy and paste this just so it's easy for you and paste it in. So to explain this, it's very similar to the model for the item. It's basically just saying that the main difference is that instead of it being a generated item, we're rendering the item as a block, a cube block. This is what gives it the appearance of that block in your hand, even though you're actually holding an item. And then we're just setting the texture, and we're putting all here because it's the same texture for every single side. We're setting it to this, it's basically pointing to this directory here inside of textures. So we need to just change the mod ID and the block name. Change mod ID to your mod ID, so in my case tutorial, and then block name is again the name of the JSON pretty much. It's exactly what you put for the path here in ModBlocks. So ruby_block. Great, so that's done now. The next thing we need is a block state. So we want to right click here on block states and create a new file. And we're gonna call this, well actually, you know what? Let's do the item first. So, because we're on models anyway. So actually go over to models and go to item, and we actually need to make what is it? I'm blanking. A model for our item, our block item. So right click, new, file, and we're gonna call this same thing, ruby_block.json. And then if you go in the description of this video, go to that second link, it will take you to the models item JSON, and you can just copy this and paste it in. And to explain what this is, it's basically just saying that the item that you're holding, it should reference this this model here. So it's just saying the parent here is in the block directory. And again, change the mod ID to your mod ID and the block name to your block name, ruby_block. And then great, the last thing we need to do is now that block states. So go to your block states folder here, right click, new, file, and you want to create another ruby_block.json. And again, if you go in the description of this video, I have another block states thing here. You can copy and paste the block states JSON, copy this, and paste it in. And we're going to talk about block states in more detail in another video. I want to keep this simple for you for now, but we just have pretty much one block state for our block. It's a very simple block. There's no like special cited stuff. So this is just saying there's pretty much only one variant, and it's just a standard model. And again, replace mod ID with your tutorial, your mod ID, and the block name with your block name. So Ruby_block. And if you're wondering how we find these specific JSONs here, if you wanted to look at what, like for example, a wooden logs block state is, their Blockstate JSON, what you can do is actually go down here to external libraries, open this up, and you can scroll down, or you can do Control F to search for Minecrafts. And you can find the net.minecraft project here, this Gradle library. Open this up, and this will actually show you all of the default assets and data for Minecraft, vanilla Minecraft. So we could actually open the assets here, and you can see this is their mod ID, which is Minecraft in this case. And we actually have access to all the vanilla block states. You can see them all here, and all of the vanilla models. So we could look at all of the block models and pretty much everything. So for example, if we went to block states, we could find like a log, or I don't know how to actually search for it in here, but let's scroll down and just do like the chest. This is the chest block state here, chest.json. You can see it's pretty much exactly the same as our Ruby block JSON for the block state. So yeah, that's how you find out. If you ever want to look at a vanilla one and see what they're kind of doing, you can kind of copy what another block is doing. That's the best way to find those. So yeah, just to show you that is an option. But now that these are all done, the last thing we need to do is actually just give our block a name. So go to the language folder here, go to en_us.json or whatever language file you're using, and we're gonna add a new entry here. So add a comma there, and this is gonna be pretty standard. It's just gonna be block dot your mod ID, so tutorial dot, and then the path to your block. So again, exactly what we put here. So Ruby_block. And then we're gonna set this to a custom name. So in my case, the name of this is just gonna be Ruby block. All right, so now the last thing we have to do is just add our texture. So again, you can come over down here to your textures folder, go to the blocks now in this case, because this is a block. And if we just move our window here a little bit, I have a texture here called Ruby_block, and it's just a standard little, let's see here, a standard PNG that is again in increments of 16 by 16. And it's basically just one surface of the block, and it will map it to all the surfaces. So we can throw it into blocks here and refactor, and there we go. Perfect. So now we can actually run the game by clicking the green triangle, and I will see you inside of the game. Alright, so we're inside of the game now, and if we open up our creative menu, go to search, and we go all the way down, you can see our block is there. It should also be in building blocks because that's what we set the item group to. So we have our Ruby block, and you want to test if you throw it on the ground, you should be able to see it working good there. And then also, of course, when we place it, there we go. And it might be a little bit quiet, but you can probably hear the actual sound is correct. So so the sound is working great, and when you walk over it. So yeah, looks like everything is working perfectly. Alright, so that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. Do keep in mind that right now, currently, your block is not going to drop anything when it gets broken. And this is because we need to use something called a loot table, which is a little bit more advanced, and we're going to cover it in the next few episodes. But yeah, just know for now that it's totally normal that it's not actually dropping anything. And we'll talk about more advanced blocks in the next few episodes to come. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.